Hello. Today we are going to be taking some notes on integers. Now, in your interactive notebook, these are going to go, eventually, on page 89 and 90. How this is going to work, because they are bigger pages, when we're all done reviewing them, you're going to take the pages and you're going to turn them so that they face like that. And then we can fold them in. So you would fold them in, and then you would write on this one, integer rules. And then on this side, you would take this one, tape it in, and fold it over. So eventually we're going to do that. But for writing them, we're actually going to just use the flat piece of paper first because it'll be easier. So the first thing we need to look at is there is a sheet that talks about the different rules for integers. So we're going to review those first, and then when we're done reviewing these, we're going to go and we're going to complete our fill-in-the-blanks integer note sheet. Now remember, we talked about integers being positive or negative numbers, and we looked at some examples how they can be on number lines. We talked about sea level could be considered 0, and if you're below the water, you would be a negative. If you're above the water, you'd be a positive. We talked about elevation, like a mountain. If it goes down into the below where sea level would be, that would be negative. If you were to have a mountain that would go high up into the air, that would be positive. We talked about temperatures. We talked about bank accounts. If you spend too much money and you go below 0 in your bank account, that's a negative number. If you go and you bring in money like your paycheck, then you have a positive number. So those are all different ways that we have talked about integers. We talked about absolute value and how absolute value, it looks like, if you look at your note page, the first thing, it shows you an example of an absolute value. And we talked about how that absolute value is how many places from 0 you are. So it doesn't matter if you're negative or positive, it's just how many hops or spaces from 0 would be. So a negative absolute value of -5 would be the same as a absolute value of +5. Both would be 5 steps from 0. So integers are the set of positive and negative whole numbers. So they're not a decimal and they're not a fraction. They're whole numbers. And like I said, they could be positive or negative. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how we can do some things with them. And the first thing we can do is we can add an integer. So if an integer has the same sign, so if they're both positive, so like +1 plus +2, then you're going to add and you're going to keep the sign. So look here, you can see here's a positive plus a positive, you get a positive, okay? So if we had a negative plus a negative, you would get a negative. It stays the same. If the signs are the same, add the numbers and keep the sign. Okay? So see, a -3 plus a -2 equals a -5. A +3 plus a +2 equals a +5. Pretty simple. The next thing, though, to keep in mind is if they have a different sign. Let's say you're adding a positive number to a negative number. So in that case, you're going to subtract the bigger number, or you're going to subtract the smaller number from the bigger number, and you're going to keep the sign of the number that has the greatest absolute value. So that sounds more complicated than what it really is going to look like. So let's look here. So different signs, subtract and keep the sign with the number with the largest absolute value. So that just means the number that's the biggest, if it was positive or negative, you're going to keep it as positive and negative in your answer. Okay? So different signs, find the difference. So let's look at this one. You have a -8 and a +2. Which number of these has the greater absolute value? Which one's further from 0? Christian?
-8.
-8. It's 8 spots from 0, whereas this is only 2 spots, right? So you're going to take the -8 and you're going to subtract from the -8 2. Okay, well what would 8 minus 2 be? 6, right? So we know that the answer is going to be 6, but is it going to be positive or negative? Well, Christian already told us that the 8 had the larger absolute value, and it was a negative. So our answer has to be a negative, right? Now in this case, look at our which one has the greater absolute value? Jacqueline?
Positive 8.
positive 8, right? So in this case, and we have a negative 2, we're going to still take the 8 and subtract the 2, which 8 minus 2 is 6. But this 8, is it this one that has the greater absolute value, is it a positive or negative? Positive. So your answer has to be positive. So whichever one it is. Now, sometimes they might give you something like this. Let's say they say 5 plus negative 8. Okay? Now, see, in this case, your bigger number isn't coming first, so that might be confusing. Okay? But which one in this case has the greater absolute value? Elizabeth?
Negative 8.
Negative 8, right? So you would take 8, subtract 5. What is 8 minus 5?
Will you add it?
Because this is a negative, you actually subtract it. Because you can't add a positive and an out actually taking away. So think about it. If you had on a number line, if you went down to negative 8 and you added a positive 5, are you going to go down further or are you going to go up? You're going to go up, right? So that means you're adding it. So what is negative 8, or what is 8 minus 5? 3. So now that you know it's 3, you have to decide, is that 3 going to be a positive or a negative?
Negative.
It's a negative because negative 8 has the greater absolute value, right? So your answer would be negative 8. All right, so that's the rule of addition. The next rule is subtraction. In subtraction, you use this idea of keep, change, change. You keep the first number, you change the operation, and you change the integer from a negative to a positive or positive to negative. So, you do not subtract. When it says subtract, you never actually subtract. It's kind of strange. You add the opposite of the number. So, keep the sign. So you're going to keep the sign of the first number. You're going to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign. And then you're going to change the sign of the number behind the subtract to its opposite. So, let's look at an example of this. Okay? You have negative 7 minus negative 4. That looks really confusing. But let's try keep, change, change. Okay? So keep the first number. It's going to be a negative 7. Stays the same. Change your operation from subtract to add. And because we changed this, we're also going to change this to the opposite sign. So it's no longer a negative 4, it's now a positive 4. So now let's use the same rule we just applied to addition. Which one of these, the negative 7 or the positive 4, has the greater absolute value? Jacqueline?
Negative 7.
Negative 7. It's further away from 0, right? So take negative 7 or 7 minus 4. What is that?
3.
3. Now you have to decide, is it going to be a positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative because negative 7 had the greater absolute value. It's further. So that's your answer. Remember, this is just a little start of the notes. We're going to go through these little rules, and then we're going to go to our page. We're actually going to put some stuff into practice, and it'll start to make more sense the more you do it. Okay? All right, let's look at multiply. I like multiplying integers because it's easy. Okay, multiplying integers. If the signs are the same, you multiply and the product is positive. So, it doesn't matter if you multiply a positive and a positive, or if you multiply a negative and a negative. Either way, your answer is going to be a positive number. So, let's look at that. So, if the signs are the same, you multiply and the product is always positive. So, a positive times a positive equals a negative times a negative equals a positive. It always equals a positive if they're the same. Okay? So negative 4 times negative 2, you want to think that's going to be negative 8, but it's not. It will be positive 8. It ends up canceling itself and becoming a positive. Okay? But if your signs are different, if you have a negative times a positive, then your product will be a negative. So, different signs, it's a negative. Positive signs, it's a positive. Okay? Alright. I like to think of this as positive people and negative people. Positive people. You take somebody who's a really positive, happy person, and they become best friends with another really happy, positive person. Guess what? They're always happy. They're always positive because they're together in happiness. Positive, positive equals positive. But what's interesting, if you take a really negative person who grumbles about everything and thinks everything's awful, they're always bummed out about, doesn't matter what we do, we take them to the movies, they're like, well, I didn't like the movie anyway. Well, guess what happens when they find someone who's just like them, that's negative? They complain together. Well, I didn't like the movie. Well, I didn't like the movie either. You're right. This place is awful. They're miserable together, and guess what? They're happy. They're positive because misery likes company. They like to be together, and they're negative. But here's the funny thing. If you take a really positive person and you take a really negative person and you put them together, they're miserable. They're negative because the negative person drags the positive person down, ruins their day. So when you multiply a positive times positive, you get a what? If you multiply a negative times a negative, you get a positive. And when you multiply a negative times a positive, you get a negative. Right. It's my really silly way of remembering it. Okay, in problems with more than two factors, meaning like 2 times 2 times negative 3. An even number of negatives, 2 and 4, will be a positive answer. An odd number, 1, 3, and 5, will be a negative number. So if you have 3 digits, like 1 times 3 times negative 2, you'll end up with a negative. If you have negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times 1, you'll end up with a positive. Okay? All right, let's talk dividing. Dividing. If the signs are the same, you divide and the quotient is positive. So, once again, same sign, positive. A positive divided by a positive is a positive. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Does it sound the same as when you multiply? It is exactly the same. So negative 4 divided by negative 2 would be positive 2. Negative 12 divided by negative 6 would be what? Positive 2. Good. But if the signs are different, you divide and the quotient would be a negative. Okay? So a positive divided by a negative is a negative. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So negative 8 divided by positive 2 would be what, class? Don't be ashamed, you got it.
Negative 4?
Negative 4, right. Positive divided by a negative always equals a negative. Okay, so we're going to take these notes and we're going to put them to the side. And we're going to look at these notes. We're going to put this into practice, okay? All right. So we're going to look at the very top, guys, where it says integer operations. Notice it says a scuba diver swam down 25 feet. Would that be a positive or a negative?
Negative.
Negative. Then down 10 feet. Is that a positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative. Now up. So he went down 25 feet, then down 10 feet. Now where is he at? If he goes down 25 and then down 10 more, where is he at?
35.
Negative 35. Right. Now he's going to go up 5 feet. Where is he at now, guys?
30.
Negative 30. Right. But then he's going to go down 50. Where is he at? Negative 80. Good job, Levi. Now he's going to go up 65. So he's down negative 80. We're going to go up 65. Negative 15. Very good. Then down 45. Negative 60. Good job, Riley. So where do you end up? Negative 60 feet. And that is an example of adding and subtracting integers. So just think of that little scuba diver going up and down. All right, so let's go to adding. All right. think, adding two descents, so you're going down together, goes even deeper. So just like that scuba diver, he went down and then he went down even more, you're going further down negative. So the same side, when you're adding, you're going to add the absolute values and keep the common sign. So an example would be 5 plus 8 is what? What's 5 plus 8?
13.
13, thank you. Well, what's negative 2 plus negative 3?
Negative 5.
Negative 5. Good. Okay. All right. Different sign. We have different signs this time. If we have different signs, you're going to subtract absolute value and use the sign of the number with the higher absolute value. Okay, so think about it. An ascent can be partially canceled out or overcome a descent. Or basically meaning you go down, then you go back up. Then you're going to go down. So this is a positive plus a negative, or a negative plus a positive. An example, 5 plus negative 8. Which one has the greater absolute value?
Negative 8. Negative 8.
Negative 8. So what's 8 minus 5? Yes.
13.
3, but is it going to be a positive or negative? Negative, because negative 8 had the greater absolute value. Good. Can somebody do negative 2 plus 3? Christian.
Negative 2 plus 3, that's 1.
1, because 3 had the greater absolute value, and it's a positive. Good. All right, let's go to subtract. Change. Change a subtraction problem to an addition problem. How? Switch the operation to a plus sign while changing the sign of the second number to keep it equivalent. So then, add using the rule over here. Examples. We're going to rewrite it. So we have 5 minus negative 8. Okay, so we're going to keep the first number, change the subtraction sign to what? Addition. If we change that, we have to equal it out, or we got to make it still work out, so we have to change the negative 8 to what? Positive 8. Okay, so what's 5 plus 8?
13.
Good. Do the next one. Can somebody tell me what it would be? Nicole?
So is it a positive 3?
Well, start off first. What do I write it? What do I do with the first number? Negative 2.
You have to put a positive 2?
Nope. Because what do we do with the first number?
Oh. And then
So what do I do with the negative 2?
you change the 3 to a negative.
Yeah, so you're going to keep the negative 2, change the subtraction to addition, and change the positive 3 to a negative 3. Now what do you have, Nikki?
Negative 5.
Negative 5. Good. So remember, another great analogy for understanding integers is money. Think about adding and removing, subtracting credits and debt. Removing a debt is a positive movement. So if you had negative $20, but I gave you $25 to put in your account, you're now subtracting $25 from your debt, which is actually getting you back into the positive. All right, so let's go to the back. Multiplying and dividing. Okay? On multiplying and dividing. Multiply and divide normally, but if both sides match, the answer will be what, guys? Positive and positive, you get a? Positive. Negative and negative, you get a? Positive. If they don't match, it will be a? Negative. So if you get a positive and a negative, you end up with a negative. Okay? Alright, let's do an example. Negative 4 divided by 2. You have a negative and a positive. So what is our answer going to be? Yes. Negative 2. Good. Negative 5 times negative 8. You have a negative and a negative. Isaac, what is our answer going to be?
Sorry, I got lost.
Negative 5 times negative 8. You have a negative and a negative. What is your answer going to be?
Negative 40.
Negative and a negative equals a?
Positive.
Positive 40. Good job. All right. I want you guys to finish the practices on your own using your notes. Okay, guys? Got it? All right. If you have any questions, you can go back and review this or email me or come and see me later. Thank you.